Hiring a cold calling team, internal versus offshore. The real question behind internal versus offshore. Hiring a cold calling team isn't a debate about whether the channel works. It does. In 2024, the average conversation to meeting rate was 4.82%, and 82% of buyers say they've accepted a meeting from a cold call when the outreach is relevant. The decision is about which operating model will produce qualified meetings and pipeline with the least risk to your brand and revenue targets. Most B2B leaders feel pulled in two directions. In-house SDRs offer control and alignment, while offshore teams promise lower costs and faster scale. The problem is that both sides can be right, depending on your ACV, sales cycle complexity, compliance requirements, and how quickly you need pipeline. If you only compare salaries or hourly rates, you'll almost always pick the wrong answer. In our experience as a cold calling agency and SDR agency, the cleanest way to frame this choice is simple. Measure outcomes, not activity. Your goal isn't more dials, it's more qualified conversations that turn into real opportunities. That means deciding which structure can consistently deliver meetings your AEs actually want to run. Why cold calling still builds pipeline, and why it's less forgiving now. Cold calling still works because it's direct, fast, and hard to ignore when it's done well. A 4.82% meeting rate from live conversations is enough to create meaningful pipeline even in competitive markets, especially when you pair phone with modern list building services and smart follow-up. The takeaway isn't call more, it's run a tighter outbound motion. At the same time, buyers have raised the bar for relevance. Gartner reports 61% of B2B buyers prefer a rep-free experience, and 73% avoid suppliers that send irrelevant outreach. That doesn't mean you can't cold call. It means generic scripts and sloppy targeting get punished faster than ever. This is where internal versus offshore becomes a buyer experience decision. If your messaging, qualification, and handoff are weak, an offshore outsourced sales team can amplify the damage at scale, but an unmanaged in-house team can burn a territory just as quickly. The model matters, but the operating discipline matters more. The three models you're actually choosing between, internal versus offshore, is often shorthand for three distinct options. An in-house cold calling team, a US-based sales development agency, onshore sales outsourcing, or a fully offshore program. The differences show up in control, speed, and consistency, not just cost. If you're evaluating cold calling companies, you'll make better decisions by naming the model precisely before you price it. In-house works best when your deal is complex, your narrative changes often, and brand risk is high. You get tight alignment with marketing and product, and you can coach in real time. But you also own hiring, ramp, management, and the tech stack. If you don't already have frontline leadership, building internal can turn into recruiting and enablement instead of pipeline. Onshore and offshore outsourcing sit on a spectrum. A strong outbound sales agency can launch faster because the infrastructure already exists, while offshore can reduce labor costs dramatically, especially for scripted qualification, reactivation, or international segments. For many teams, the best answer is a hybrid. Keep high-stakes conversations close to home and offshore the data-heavy work and lower complexity calling. Cost math that doesn't lie. Measure cost per qualified meeting. The most common mistake we see is comparing internal salaries to offshore hourly rates and calling it a business case. A fully loaded in-house SDR seat in North America is typically $9,750 to $14,425 per month once you include compensation, benefits, tools, management time, and operational support. If your plan doesn't include ramp time, often 3 to 4 months, enablement, and QA, you're underestimating internal costs before you even start. Offshore economics are real and structural. One widely cited comparison shows an average monthly salary of roughly 18,423 PHP in the Philippines, about $339, versus $4,588 in the US, which explains why outsourcing is so widespread. The global call and contact center outsourcing market was estimated at $102.6 billion in 2024, and cost optimization is the top driver. About 65% of enterprises cite it as their primary reason for outsourcing. But cost only matters in relation to output, so your core metric should be cost per qualified meeting and cost per dollar of pipeline created. Many providers report 40 to 60% savings versus building in-house, but those savings disappear quickly if meeting quality drops, show rates fall, or your team burns through your ICP with irrelevant outreach. Use benchmarks, then validate with a short pilot. If you can't prove lower cost per qualified meeting and clean pipeline, cheaper per hour is just an expensive way to burn your market. Quality control is the whole game, and coaching beats geography. B2B buyers aren't rejecting cold calls, they're rejecting bad calls. With 73% saying irrelevant outreach makes them avoid suppliers, every team needs a playbook that enforces targeting, positioning, and qualification. This is why the internal versus offshore debate is often misplaced. The real difference maker is whether you have weekly coaching, call reviews, and a clear scoring rubric. If you want offshore cold callers to succeed, you need to make the motion simpler and more controlled. Start with research, enrichment, and list building services, then move into lower complexity calling where qualification rules are crisp and the value proposition is easy to articulate. When you try to throw nuanced enterprise discovery at junior reps with no frameworks, you get generic scripts. And generic scripts are exactly what modern buyers punish. AI and strong enablement can narrow the gap dramatically. The teams that win document ICP definitions, objection handling, talk tracks, and handoff criteria. Then use AI-assisted personalization and intent signals to keep outreach relevant across channels. When phone outreach is supported by tight sequences, often alongside a cold email agency or LinkedIn outreach services, you get higher show rates and fewer spray-and-pray behaviors. Common pitfalls that make either model fail and how to fix them. The fastest way to fail with offshore is choosing a vendor purely on rate. Rock-bottom pricing often correlates with rep churn, weak training, and minimal accountability, which is how territories get burned and meetings turn into no-shows. If you're going to outsource sales, require call recordings, documented QA, manager-to-rep ratios, and reporting tied to outcomes, meetings held, sequel rate, and pipeline created. The fastest way to fail with internal is underestimating the true cost and effort of operating the function. Leaders often budget for base and commission, but forget benefits, tools, data, enablement, management time, and ramp. Yet those are exactly why an in-house SDR seat lands in the $9,750 to $14,425 a month range, fully loaded. If you don't have a capable SDR manager or time to be one, the control advantage disappears. Both models fail when teams measure dials instead of outcomes, and when they ignore data security and compliance. Activity metrics can hide bad lists, weak talk tracks, and poor targeting, while sloppy CRM access and unclear data handling can create real regulatory and brand risk. Whether you're building internally or hiring an outsourced B2B sales team, insist on role-based access, documented policies, and a measurement system that prioritizes meeting quality over volume. A practical 90-day pilot to choose the right structure. If you're unsure, don't overthink it, test it. A 90-day A/B pilot is often the cleanest decision framework. Run one internal seat or internal pod against an outsourced program, then compare cost per qualified meeting and pipeline created. Because cold calling success is measurable, You can make a data-backed call without locking yourself into long-term headcount risk. To make the pilot fair, both sides need the same inputs, the same ICP, the same list quality, the same offer, and the same meeting definition. This is where many sales outsourcing experiments go wrong. One team gets great data and tight messaging, while the other gets a stale list and vague qualification rules. Document an outbound charter before day one, so both teams are playing the same game. Then, standardize reporting around outcomes, connect rate, meetings per 100 live conversations, show rate, meeting to opportunity rate, and pipeline influenced. When you overlay fully loaded spend, you'll see the truth quickly, especially if one team looks busy but underperforms on SQL quality. If you're considering pay-per-appointment lead generation or pay-per-meeting lead generation, be extra strict about how qualified meeting is defined and verified. Where the market is heading: hybrid teams, tighter governance, and faster ramp. Outsourcing is only becoming more mainstream, and not just for cost. With the call and contact center outsourcing market estimated at $102.6 billion in 2024, it's clear that companies are comfortable buying specialized capacity when it comes with mature management and process. The winners will be the teams that treat cold calling as an operational system, not a headcount decision. For most B2B orgs, hybrid is the most defensible end state. Keep strategic account outreach, executive conversations, and high ACV discovery with internal or US-based reps, and use offshore support for enrichment, reactivation, and lower complexity segments where scripts and qualification are consistent. That approach often captures a large share of the 40 to 60% savings outsourcing can deliver, without taking unnecessary brand risk. At SalesHive, we've seen the most reliable results come from combining disciplined playbooks, consistent coaching, and the right mix of talent, whether you're building internally or working with a B2B sales agency for cold calling services. If you take one next step, make it this: build a fully loaded cost model, run a controlled pilot, and commit to weekly call reviews. That's how you turn internal versus offshore from a debate into a repeatable pipeline engine.